Hey everybody, Tom here with Hidden Beats, and today we're talking with Wes Mack. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I got to read over some of your bio there, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about what makes you tick. So, before we get started, can you give a little kind of intro about yourself and your music?
Yeah. So I've been playing music, kind of one of those for life individuals, right? I was in a band since I was a little kid. I'm an actor as well and a director, so I spend a lot of my time making art and writing songs for other artists. And yeah, I probably had like a good chunk of my life where I was a musician, just playing to like nobody in bars for a long period of time, the essential like cut your teeth kind of thing. And at some
Hmm.
point, 10 years ago, I had my first like sort of commercial hit that, changed the way my life was going and allowed me to do a bunch of neat stuff and tour around. And yeah, it's just kind of evolved from there, right? And the music industry continues to change and you take different steps and, ride the roller coaster of it. And I've been really lucky in my life to get to have some pretty cool highs doing this thing of music.
Hmm. Can you pinpoint like in your younger days, maybe a song or an album that kind of really went, holy crap, I want to do music?
Yeah. Oh man, there's a lot. There's a lot of different chapters. Like I remember the one of the very first, like when I was a little kid, I had three cassette tapes. I had one that was Hank Williams Sr., I had a Beach Boys, and I had a Beatles one.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, I remember the Beatles one. The first time I ever listened to that, it was like I was really, really young. And it went from like listening to like kids music, like having like Raffi or something on, to something that sounded really like aggressive. Like, by comparatively, like the Beatles isn't that like aggressive, and you're not listening like the Deftones or something. But I think it was a compilation of like Beatles rock songs, and I remember it just like I don't know. I could feel my little brain opening in that moment to just like you could make all these sounds and you record this stuff. And this is when I was like 3 or 4 years old. It's like one of my earliest like childhood memories. I was sitting in the backseat of a car. I don't think at that point in time I wanted to be a musician, but I think that's kind of what opened me up to like it was just a whole other world. Like
Hmm.
I don't know if I just remember like we'd go on long road trips kind of thing. Like me and my parents would be driving through the mountains and I would throw those on and it was like you were just on another like plane of existence while you're listening to that kind of stuff, especially when you're a kid and it's all so new.
Yeah, music definitely hits hard sometimes when you get
Yeah,
that right song and it's like, oh
yeah,
my.
man, totally. And I had a number of different chapters of that throughout life. Like I remember getting into like Our Lady Peace and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and stuff when I was like a teenager, and and
Hmm.
and like I remember there was a Dirks Bentley concert that I saw like back in 2008 or something that really opened me up. That was like when I started to see country as a different like entity than what it had been. Cause like I have a huge amount of love for some of the classic country of the like, the Hank Williams kind of era stuff. And then I grew up, when I was a kid, like Alan Jackson was big and Garth
Yeah.
Brooks. And I really love that kind of stuff. But I remember Dirks played in 2008 on the Coke stage in Calgary and I saw him and I was pretty young, but it just like it was everything I liked about rock music and everything that I it was all the stuff I liked about rock music excavated out into this other genre because what rock was doing in like 2008 I wasn't really interested in,
Hmm.
and I was just like, oh man, this is where it's happening. And I remember like just diving into that and into Eric Church's stuff and Eli Young band and like kind of taking me down like the beginning of me wanting to really make country music as an artist.
Yeah, and Dirks definitely does a really good job at mixing
Oh,
the two
dude.
genres.
Yeah. Oh, his live show. I've actually been fortunate. I got to play a couple of times on some festivals with him subsequently. Um, his live show is unreal. I've probably seen him play like 5 or 6 times over the years and like tiny stages and huge stages. And yeah, it's all the storytelling and country and all the like warmth of it, but like a really rowdy kind of rock show to it too.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah, totally, man.
Now, we were just talking a bit about you moving around, and I'm
Yeah.
curious what your thoughts are about the music scene kind of in the different locations you've been.
Yeah. It's odd, so there's like a totally different flavor everywhere you go for music. If you're out in Toronto or if you're down in Nashville or you're in Los Angeles or in Vancouver, every town's kind of got like a flavor. I grew up in Calgary, so it's got its own. Calgary's actually kind of a weird one in that like it's got tons of country music and then it's also got this really like lively like indie rock scene that's always gone on there.
Hmm.
Or at least that was my experience with it. maybe the thing I've found most is like the internet has kind of changed a lot of that. There's maybe things feel less regional, because you can kind of listen to anything from anywhere. And sometimes I don't like that. Sometimes I feel like it strips away the like uniqueness of like finding some hole in the wall band playing somewhere. But I think you still get that. Like, I mean, Nashville is the big eye opener one when you go there. Like, I always laugh. Like you can really walk into like any bar on like a Tuesday in the middle of the afternoon and find a band playing for tips that's better musicians than you'll ever find anywhere else in the world.
Hmm.
Because it's such a mecca for that kind of stuff. But yeah, I really enjoy that though. You can go into like some small town bar and find a musician who like by all rights is as talented as anyone like playing stadiums, and that's kind of the great like beauty, but also like pain in the ass thing about the music industry, right? It's not that like
Yeah.
the best stuff always rises to the top, and it's not that the worst always falls to the bottom. It's like there's a huge element of luck and timing and who and then sometimes just amazing songs carving through, and it's like a big mess of all of that.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, I
Yeah,
was I was lived in Calgary once upon a time, and I'm in Ottawa now. So
right.
transition between the two, it's very different, but also very much that kind of down home community, just different feel in each spot, really.
Yeah, yeah, totally,
Now,
totally.
what do you think it takes to stand out more so in like a saturated market like this now?
I mean, it's tough. Like, I don't know. It depends who I'm talking to, and it depends on day of the week. If I'm being a bit of a jaded asshole about it, kind of thing, you can sometimes, go like, all right, well, maybe you just need to be famous on TikTok or something like that to like. There is a huge stream there where it's like, if you were a really good juggler and you juggle very well and you build a large enough audience, there's an argument that it's easier to turn you than a famous juggler into a musician by like a record company because you have an audience. So a lot of it
Hmm.
just becomes about building an audience of people who like something about you. And then it's like, cool, well, you get songwriters to write, for that person, you turn them into a musician. That's the jaded side of it. I mean, then there's also the side where it's like, I see stuff rise to the top where I'm like, where the talent feels pretty undeniable to me. Like I'm a big fan of Noah Khan, who's now all of a sudden becoming like pretty known in like the pop realm of things. He had Post Malone on a song, but I was listening to
Hmm.
his stuff back in like 2019 is when I got turned on to his stuff. And it felt like inevitable to me that he would like rise to the top. He has a unique songwriter voice. He's got a unique voice in and of himself. And I don't know. It just feels authentic. I think that's kind of what it usually comes down to. Like you look at like a guy like a Zach Bryan right now having like the big rise that he has. Um, I think a lot of that's authenticity. If I watch his videos of him sitting around playing an acoustic guitar, I feel like it's not contrived. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm hearing a slice of his life or a slice of his imagination or something like that. And it doesn't grate in the same way that like I don't like a lot of the stuff that will like blow up on TikTok, I'm sure. I don't love the like, hey, here, how's it going? Like screaming in your face kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
never gonna and that's fine because there's gonna be a niche for everybody. I'm not saying they need to shut it down. Um, but I think for me at least, it's the authentic stuff like that that typically works the best, or at least that's the stuff I enjoy.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You hear authenticity in a song, and you can
Yeah.
hear mechanical, contrived stuff that doesn't seem like it's that person singing. You can hear that for sure.
Yeah, you totally can. And here's the thing, both of those things will rise. There will be Zach Bryan's and there will be a juggler who a record company signs who they go, cool, because you can do it. You can equip them with writers and you can equip them with a song, and both of those things will stand a chance at battling out at the top. I think the odd thing about the internet era is that like there's enough people to listen to every kind of music. Like
Hmm.
you could form an audience of just like there's huge swaths of music on the internet that like I don't like but are massively popular. And I don't have anything against them. It's just like there's an avenue for everything. I think that's something that's tricky to remember at times because you see some of the big stuff pushed down the pipe.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, there's an avenue for everything.
No, and you're right. There is like I definitely don't like certain songs or certain
Yeah,
types of music, but I'm a fan of anything good that's a good song that's being put out that hits different. I will try to enjoy that a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. I usually, I've heard this a bunch throughout my career from some of the wiser people I've worked with of like it's better to sound new than good. Of just like the idea of like going for something that's once there's like an established sound that works, it's pretty easy usually to emulate, but that doesn't necessarily make that a good idea. You're almost better off to carve out into uh totally unknown territory. I was writing years ago with a guy named Jay Joyce, and he's done all the production for Eric Church and for Brothers Osborne, Lanco, and bunch of bands I really like. And he was like, well, you never really can know if anything's gonna work, so you kind of have to just like go after something that's interesting to you creatively and weird, because at least then you'll enjoy it. Like
Hmm.
you have as good a shot throwing something out there that's kind of strange and that it's unique that you like than if you try and chase after the current, because the current's always it's always moving, and if you spend your whole career just chasing other people's sounds, I could be fine. I don't know if
It'll
it's
do something,
yeah,
but
it'll do something. It's just whether or not it'll be satisfying to you. And I don't know, the worst feeling, and I know this one, when you put out something that you really love and it doesn't do well, it's easier to sleep with that than it is when you put out something where you're chasing it and it doesn't do well. Because
mhm.
like when something does well, whether you're chasing it or it's truthful, there's always an element that feels good about it. Obviously, the best version is when you're your most authentic self and you've done it and it works great, but you're still better off, I feel like, on that page than when you're just totally chasing after the current sound and it flops. Because then you're like,
Yeah.
why did I even do this? I didn't even like this. And you're just wasting your time.
I know one artist in particular who's local to here who's done that, who's chased sounds, and
Yeah.
it's such a weird, diverse way he's trying to do things, but not all of it's good, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's hard because, like, I don't know. I would have had a cleaner cut answer to this years ago, but it's like you want to be successful, and part of that's everybody's ego, and part of that's just wanting to stay in the game and be relevant and pay your rent and all that. So like I understand the fear that drives everybody to do that, but
Hmm.
it seldom seems to pay off, and it never feels great. You definitely you feel better when you're doing original stuff or stuff that feels truthful to what you care about.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious, who are you listening to these days that you think more people should have on their radars?
I mean, I guess I actually don't really need to beat the Noah Khan drum anymore because he's like blowing up everywhere. I felt for years, I feel like everybody needs to listen to that. I'm really bad. I always collapse on this on these questions because it'll be like niche stuff in my phone where it's like some dude I found videos of. I can't remember the guy's name. It's like John Poppin or something. I'm horrible at answering this question until it reaches like a certain level. But I would always say listen to Noah Khan. His records are dope, and I just caught one of his live shows, and the guy is legit.
Yeah, I'm gonna hopefully get out. He has a show here in, I think in February, and it sold out within a week or something like that.
Yeah,
So
it blows my mind because I saw him a year ago at a 1,000 seat venue in Vancouver, because like just again it was right before he kind of went mega.
mhm.
And I'm glad I got to see him then. I the show I just saw, he said it was his, like, said to the crowd it was his first arena show kind of thing, and now he'll be doing
Okay.
nothing but arena shows. And it's nuts watching the speed that stuff blows up now, where it's like you all it takes is one song really spinning up.
Mhm.
He's got like records before, he's got like a bunch of body of work, but all of a sudden it's like, I think Dial Drunk like really spun up like massively,
Yeah.
and makes him like a household name all of a sudden.
That was Zach Bryan for me, actually. I got to cover him. Like, so I'm a photographer also, and I go
Oh,
actually cover
cool.
live shows. And he was at a festival locally here on like an earlier time slot, and the kind of the first
Yeah.
time a lot of people saw him, and I was out shooting him, and I said, okay, this could be interesting. And then all of a sudden, you see his name everywhere now.
Yeah. Yeah. I always get like, I feel like I get to see the future a little when it's like, so I write a fair bit for other artists as well. Um, and I usually like to do a little homework in advance and say, cool, what's some stuff you're into right now? Like, what are you listening to? Who are artists that are like inspirational to you? And then I'll make a little playlist of it, because it kind of gets your head spinning in the right direction, especially if you've never met somebody before and you're about to write with them.
Hmm.
Um, And maybe a year and a half ago, I started getting everybody saying like, "I'm really into Zach Bryan. I'm really into Zach Bryan." And usually the people that are writing a lot in like country and in Nashville, you kind of peer like a year and a half ahead into what's about to blow up because everybody all of a sudden wants to sound like that. Like I remember when everybody, the answer to that question for a while was Maren Morris. It was just like
Okay.
make it like Maren Morris,
Yeah.
and then like all of a sudden Maren Morris was like globally everywhere kind of thing. So Zach Bryan is now like executing the phase that I a year and a half ago was like, oh, I'm pretty sure this guy's going to be like blowing up through
Yeah.
the roof very shortly here.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's really you can Nashville's an odd one like that because it's such a there's so many people writing and it is like the center of where a lot of these songs end up coming from. So you end up with like even a word will travel across town. Like I remember when neon lights needed to be written into like every song and you would feel it like move through Nashville where every write you got into somebody mentioned that phrase. It was just like a hot button commodity, sounded like a good idea, and then for like a year afterwards everything on the radio like talked about neon lights. It's the beauty and the monster that is Nashville, right? Where it's
Hmm.
like some of it for sure has the most talented music community I've ever seen, but it also just has like there's probably 300 songs a day written in that town, you know, at like a professional level. And
Yeah.
so it's like a lot of music. It's turning a crank really hard.
Very mechanical for sure.
Yeah, and like the good side of that that I enjoy is the talent pool, but also like you get off a plane there and you walk around that city and music is taken seriously there on a way in a way that it isn't anywhere else I've ever been. It is an industry there. It is money there. And
Hmm.
while that can be kind of gross at times, it also makes people like it's not arts and crafts there. It's not going and talking about your feelings there. People look at music as like a big money industry, and there's
Hmm.
something kind of fun about that where you're like, oh cool, because in many cities in the world it's like, oh, I'm a musician. It's like, oh yeah, like sorry about that. Must be, must be tough. Whereas Nashville, it's like, oh, I'm like I'm a signed songwriter or whatever. It's like, oh shit, like okay, you're
Yeah,
you're
you're here.
making
Wow.
this.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing it at the highest level. So it's kind of fun. I remember the first time walking around there, people react differently there to it. It's an industry.
And speaking of music, I mean, we are here to talk more about your music, and you do have an EP coming out, I believe, on Friday.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I just
I-
shared the art for it for the first time.
Yeah, I actually just saw that this morning.
Cool.
So, can you give us a little bit of a backstory behind that?
Yeah, it's a strange record because I started it like 2 weeks before the first pandemic like lockdown hit, like back in March 2020 is when I started working on
Okay.
this thing. So many of the plans I had probably changed a lot of like, you originally thought I would probably travel around more for it and like go to Nashville and go wherever and work in studios. And a lot of this record ended up getting put together in like a really modular way where it's like me working out of my studio sharing tracks with people all over the place. I did a whole bunch of it out at my cabin. um I don't know, man. It was like it was almost more like a lifestyle than a record on this, where it was especially through like I did a lot of the music work on this during like all the various phases of lockdowns and yada yada. So it was like it's kind of my like only outlet, for periods of time there. So
Hmm.
it became very, very lifeline oriented, where it was like, um, it just felt like it gave me something to really like pour a bunch of energy into that I loved. It's odd now having it come out kind of like 4 years after it started. It's been drawn out over huge amounts of time. I can really like I can go and listen to it and feel each of the different chapters of where I was at.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm in the end, I'm really proud of it, and it kind of putting it together. It really changed the way I look at making music. It really like it embraced the like the Zoom rights and the sharing tracks from city to city. And I used to really hate doing that. I felt like writing on Zoom or on like Skype back in the day felt like you never really got a vibe going on.
Yeah.
Whereas there was no way around it during this. So it got to a point where like I feel like I can write really well in those situations now. Like I don't know, it just became more normal eventually.
Hmm.
I found it was helpful usually to bring in more of a complete idea than trying to totally just find it because you're not in a room with a bunch of people. But the upside to all of it was like there was kind of this acceptance you could work with anybody anywhere. You know, it used to be like people didn't like Zoom writing, so they wouldn't do it. So you, if you wanted to write with someone who lived in a different city, you had to go there.
Yeah.
Um, that was not the case on this record. I wrote with people in Nashville, in Toronto, in LA, you know, in Vancouver. And so that was a huge upshot to it, because all of a sudden you can tap talented people from all over the place, and not necessarily have to like fly and go everywhere. I love that. For I don't know, it's pretty rad when you can like wake up in the morning, have your breakfast and stroll into the next room and be like, oh cool, my buddy from Nashville is here, like who I
Hmm.
think is a dope writer, and you get to make something that you like.
So now, knowing how the process changed, how do you think your music itself has evolved? Like going back to like a 2012 waiting on Maria, or waiting on
Yeah,
Maria,
yeah.
until now, how do you feel your music itself has evolved?
It's gone through a lot of phases, you know, from there to here. I mean, that was, you know, back then writing that and having that be on Heartland and stuff. That was all me just writing on my own. I'd never co-written a song probably at that point in time. And then I go through my whole like first album era. And that's the one that, you know, has a couple of like top tens and top 20s on it. And I got to do the Shania tour and all that. But and that phase was very much learning how to co-write and writing with people who knew a lot more about writing than I did. Um, you know, and just like learn. I feel like that whole era of my career is a lot of being a sponge,
Hmm.
which is kind of the case I think for most artists. And then you get into my next album, you get into soul, where it was like a little more even ground, where I could go toe to toe with a bunch of, you know, of writers and bring my own perspective to a lot of things, as well as use a lot of the tricks that I'd learned, you know, from the first record. And then writing this one has been interesting because I've been doing so much writing for and with other artists, where like I've got a couple of songs on the charts right now that are things I've wrote for other people,
Hmm.
which has been cool, because then I really get to um I mean, I'm still clearly still learning. I feel like nobody's done. You write with somebody new who's got cool ideas, it changes your perspective. But it's fun to get to a place where you feel like you can actually bring like, you can have an idea and realize it and bring it in, and either help other artists to like bring their ideas to life, or sometimes if it's something that I particularly love, yank it back onto one of my own records.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's the continued evolution. And at the end of the day, I just try to be, you know, not too up my own ass about the whole thing, because it's like it's songwriting, it's not brain surgery.
Yeah.
You try and have fun with it. You know, I feel like you can't go on that little song journey without taking yourself too seriously somewhere along the lines. I probably did at various phases in there. At this point, you know, I'm just trying to make cool music, stuff that I like, help other people do the same, and I enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it too as if you're not learning while you're doing something, then you're not doing it anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
You're stuck
totally.
there. It's kind of that one spot then.
Yeah. And I mean, my favorite thing, I love getting into writes these days, where I find the person I'm writing with to be like better than me. You know, it's the same as like an athletic kind of thing, right? Where it's like
Hmm.
you want to be training with people who are better than you by a little bit, so that they push you, so you're chasing after them. I don't think it's usually helpful to sort of, if you're writing with people who are just getting into it, you can probably help them along a bunch. But I think it's important to be kind of grabbing from all over. You also sometimes will, I find when you write with a really green writer, you can also learn stuff from them too. You
Yeah.
know, things that you've almost forgotten along the way. Somebody who is very green might suggest something that kind of breaks the rules because they don't know them, and you go, oh yeah, well, that's a good idea.
Hmm.
We don't need the rules on that. You know, it's songwriting is an interesting thing, because you it's not that you have to follow a specific structure. It can be really helpful. I find it's nice to know the blueprint for like what typically makes a good song, and then
Hmm.
you can start to break pieces of it and go, nah, we don't need that there. We can do something better over there. But it definitely helps. There are tricks I've picked up over the years from writing with some of the best writers I think I've written with, you know, guys who will have 10 number one plaques on the wall around them, where you go, oh yeah, like you know how to make a chorus pop every time, and there's a thing that you do and I can hear it. And maybe I won't use it on every write, but maybe if you're stuck somewhere and you're not feeling like that perfect creative inspiration, you can bring in one of these tools and be like, cool, this is how we fix this part of the song.
Hmm.
It's this balance of you know, science and art.
Yeah, and that's a
Yeah.
great balance to try to work with too.
Yeah, totally.
Now, do you have I don't have you released like the track list for the EP at all or
I don't know if I have. I don't think so. I mean, feel free to share. It's all going to be out on Friday, and it'll be rolling out this week.
well, I'm more curious of what your favorite one that
Mm.
the one that you're looking forward to seeing what fans think of the
Well,
most.
I'm kind of stoked to see what people think of Be Without You because it's not released yet. And that one I wrote with the guys in Buck 20,
Okay.
and on some Ontario duo over Zoom. Um, and I there's a couple things I've stoked about on it. It's probably the most like chill, mellow track that I've ever put out, but it also is, I think, the first time there'll be one other song on there with it, but uh it's the first time that I'm like the full on producer and I played everything on it. Like
Okay.
it's actually I guess that's not quite true in that like that would have been Waiting on Maria back in the day, but it's this full circle thing of like me fully producing something.
Hmm.
So I mean I've been able to do that probably for a number of years, I guess arguably since many many years ago. But this is the first time where I start to feel like, oh, I've in the same way with songwriters, you sit in the room with them and you learn from the good ones. I've been really lucky in my career to sit in the room with a lot of really good producers and you pick up little tricks along the way. And so yeah, I was excited to try that on this track. And again, it was like core of pandemic. So it was kind of just led me to a more insular kind of creative vibe. And that's what's going on that track. So I'm quite stoked to have that out there.
No, that'll be fun for sure.
Yeah, man.
Now, what do you do to keep yourself grounded outside of music? I mean, there's obviously a lot going on. We just got out of pandemic type of
Yeah.
scenarios, so there's probably ways that you keep yourself kind of down to earth
To-
and focused.
Totally. And it depends on like phase. I mean, I was playing on a hockey team up until the pandemic. We haven't reformed since. So I might try and I'd like to get back into that. I hadn't played in years, but that was really fun to just get back into something where you can like my buddy who pitched me on the team, he's just like, it's like just go out there for an hour and there's no I hope this email finds you well. There's none of that. It's just
Hmm.
like smashing into people and slapping pucks around. I do enjoy that. I'm a big just like nature guy. I like spending as much time in nature as I possibly can. I got really into that during the pandemic. Anybody who followed me on social media realized that I was like kind of living half my time with birds. There's this like duck pond near where I lived, and I was down there to the point where like the ducks would come and sleep underneath the bench I'd be sitting on. Like
Oh
I'd bring a
wow.
laptop down, a book, and I'd just like get a bunch of work done down there. But they would see me as like, oh yeah, when we're sitting under his bench, like dogs won't come and bark at us and
Yeah.
stuff. So I got to the point where I could get blackbirds in the park to land on my hand.
Okay.
I was like full on, Home Alone 2, bird lady.
Yeah.
So I got big into that. Let's see what else do I like to do beyond music. Well, I mean, I'm an actor, but I don't know if I really, call that's another sort of like work outlet kind of thing. I don't know if it's that grounding. It's probably more volatile. I got into playing Dungeons and Dragons with a bunch of my friends
Okay.
over pandemic. So we'll do that, every couple of weeks, and that's just like total nerd out fest and like different than playing hockey, different than time in nature. I think with all of this, it's just like trying to find some kind of balance of things that like ticks off different boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't have a good answer for how to stay balanced because I don't know that I actually do it very well, but
But
man,
everyone
I'm
does their
trying.
own, so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Now, I got a fun question I'd like to ask everyone I interview, especially on the first one, just because I think it's the most interesting out of everything. What's one thing you think should be asked more in an interview that's not asked enough?
Hmm. Okay. I it probably because it would bring up like negativity. I don't know if I have an answer to this, but like gripes that you have with like the industry or like things that bother you. It's not that I want to turn everything into like a petty bitch fest kind of thing, but part of me is like you're always like supposed to be on the up and up and everything's going great and that and I feel like sometimes my like some of my best conversations with like other artist friends uh uh are when you just get to like unload a little bit on things. You,
Yeah.
you get like the real side of stuff. I feel like it allows you to be more like truthfully grateful for the stuff that's actually working when you can kind of work that side as well. So that's maybe something that I would toss in there occasionally, of some kind of gripe.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a hardship question I like to put in
Okay.
there every so often. So that's a good one too, because I get that same feeling with my little photographer group. We might bitch about something and
Yeah, yeah, dude, it's the best. The insider baseball stuff when you can like have the group chat going with six other photographers, six
yeah.
other musicians, or whatever, and you go, "What the hell's up with this? Like, what's this person doing?" It's a fine line because you don't want to turn it into a big negativity pile on. I get that, but it's nice to remember that's there because I feel like in the social media era, everyone is having the best day of their life every single day,
Yep.
all the time. And even when you're like having something bad go on, you usually have to like talk about it like you've already moved through it.
Hmm.
Like it was a hard time, but now I'm grateful to be doing what I'm doing as opposed to like, it's going like shit today kind of thing.
Yep.
Because I feel like, and when you see everybody doing, everybody knows that's what's going on, but it's still, you forget it. You forget it a little bit. You see everybody else having the best day of their life. And I mean, that's the reason there's like boatloads of evidence that like social media makes people's, mental health worse
Yep.
for many reasons, but that probably being one of them of just like, it feels like you ask yourself, why am I not having the best day of my life at all times? But then you go and post something that suggests that you are having the best day of your life and
Hmm.
you feed into it.
Yeah, it's a big monster on its own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you hope fans take away from your music?
I hope, oh man, I think this is like the first interview of my cycle on this. So it's like the big questions coming home.
Hmm.
I hope that they make it their own, and that the coolest thing that I've ever been part of as a musician is people telling me, flashing back. So this is when I was doing the Shania Twain tour. We started doing these big meet and greets, and it was probably my first real exposure to like lots and lots of people who would listen to my music, and everybody had a take on it. And I
Hmm.
remember one person coming up to me and being like, "Your song, Before You Drive Me Crazy, it here's what it got me through this, and this is what it's about." And I won't share the like because it was pretty personal.
Yeah.
And in my head at the time, I was like, back of my mind, I don't think I showed it on my face, but I was like, that's not what that song's about at all. Like, what are you talking about? You missed the point of this thing. And then I was
Yeah.
like lying in a hotel room later that night, and I was like, oh no, I'm wrong. They're right. Because you look at like all your favorite songs, like I have no idea what the writer intended. I have no idea what the artist really intended. You can suppose and you can chase down interviews and try and figure it out. You don't really know. Um, I love that people will listen to songs of mine and pull them into their own life and have like stories and connections with them. Like I'm working with a couple artists right now who, when they said like, oh, when I was in high school, like this is your song was the one we would turn on every weekend when we would drive out to like such and such a place to this lake. And it like, that's my favorite thing because like my own music will never be my own soundtrack like that. Like I don't throw on
Yeah.
my music. I have albums though and songs that like probably most in your like teenage years and your like formative years, the stuff when you're like everything is new for the first time. When you get to be that for someone else, it feels really cool.
Yeah.
Because like that to me, there's nothing cooler than like the artists that I feel that way about, those songs were like life-changing chapters kind of thing, me
Hmm.
putting in that, listening to the Beatles for the first time when I was 3, or like any number of those chapters all through life to get to be that. So I don't know if I have like a set agenda on what I would want people to take away, just that they would take it away and make it into whatever they want and invite it into their own life.
Yeah, no, that actually makes good sense. It must be really interesting to see that unfold as a
Yeah.
musician compared to what you were seeing from musicians.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it really is because you you realize that like all the people you found the coolest, like I often will use like a Jim Morrison or something like that. Like he has this sort of like, because he died at 27, he has this sort of godlike status forever in the Christ pose with no shirt on or whatever. And
Hmm.
he infinitely cool. And he's sort of, synonymous with that. But like I have to assume, I could be wrong, that he felt insecurity in doing any number of things he was doing, but you'd never know that.
Yeah.
Like from the outside looking in. And I've heard that a number of times over the years where I'd get off stage, especially earlier in career, and people go, "Oh, you look like you're having so much fun up there." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I was nervous out of my mind, and I felt like it
Yeah.
was so awkward, and this part was weird." you realize more and more that what you feel internally and what people see of you is not the same. And there's some comfort in that you can be like, oh yeah, like you don't have to have it together all the time. You can just kind of do whatever you're going to do, and people will interpret it however they will. So you hope that your songs can go out and be there for people in the same way that some other artists' songs were there for you.
For sure. And my last question, or I guess kind of point before Zoom kicks us off here, is, are you happy?
I think I do a good mixture of having days where I'm very happy and days where I'm sad. I certainly don't think I'm someone who can like honestly say like, oh yeah, I'm happy absolutely all the time. I think I would be lying to say that. But I also know that like if I look at the last week or the last month or the last year, like it's a roller coaster, man. But I have moments where I am like very happy and very grateful to like be alive and be
Mm-hmm.
doing stuff that's creative. Because man, there's so many. There's 8 billion people in this world, and so many things going on. And so I'm grateful to an expression my parents will use, to be on the right side of the dirt and
Yeah.
getting to be here chatting with you. Yeah, so I'd say right now I'm happy.
Awesome. I think that's a pretty good way we'll leave off. I'm sure there's a million more things we can talk about, so we'll definitely have to have another conversation at some point.
That sounds good, man.
Well, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me at Wes Mack Music on every social media platform, I think. Yeah, and Hummingbird comes out on Friday.
Well, we're gonna make sure we link everything I can possibly link, anyways, in the description of the video when it comes out. And I'm looking forward to seeing the release and seeing how it goes, and definitely keeping up more with you and seeing what the future holds.
Thanks so much, dude. I really appreciate it. And good stack of questions. Throwing in the "Are you happy?" I'm a fan of that. Uh, it's a real one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever been asked that by anybody. I think that should be tossed in there more often.
Well, I try to do my best.
Yeah, man. I think you're doing great.
All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day.
I certainly shall. You do the same.
All right. Bye now.